Imagine waking up one morning and someone you love is just gone. No note, no goodbye, no trace. That's exactly what happened in the spring of 1977 in North Chicago when 19-year-old Harold Wayne Lovell walked out of his family's modest home and never returned. A big brother, a quiet soul, a kid with dreams of building things with his hands and maybe starting a family of his own someday. But within hours, his disappearance spiraled into every family's worst nightmare. At first, they thought he'd just gone to cool off. Wayne had been frustrated, job hunting hadn't gone well, and the house was crowded with tension. But one day became two, two became five, and before long it was clear something was terribly wrong. His mother, Joyce, remembers the last words he ever said, "I'll be back later, Ma," but later never came. And for nearly 35 years it was as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Then the rumors began. Whispers of a serial killer in the area, a local contractor named John Wayne Gacy, a man who seemed ordinary on the surface but was hiding one of the darkest secrets in American criminal history. As the news broke, Wayne Lovell's family watched in horror as the pieces started falling into place. Gacy had been active in their area. Some of his victims were around Wayne's age, and some had never been identified. The Lovells did the unthinkable. They submitted Wayne's dental records to authorities, terrified that he was among the dozens of boys buried beneath a suburban house of horrors. The family prayed, but not for a happy ending. By now, they just wanted closure. For decades, there was only silence. Years turned into decades. The world changed. New presidents, new wars, new inventions, but in Joyce Lovell's heart, nothing moved. Every birthday came with tears. Every knock on the door brought a flicker of false hope, and every news report about an unidentified victim reignited a wound that never fully healed. But then, something unbelievable happened. It wasn't police. It wasn't detectives. It wasn't a missing persons database. It was a Google search, done by his brother. Wayne's younger brother, who had never given up, sat down at his computer in 2010 and typed the name Harold Wayne Lovell into a public records database. He didn't expect much. After all, there had been nothing for 33 years. But then, there it was. A listing, a phone number, an address, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He stared at the screen in disbelief. Was this a cruel coincidence? A glitch? Or was it, after all these years, the miracle they never thought they'd live to see? They dialed the number. The man who answered was quiet, reserved, but something in his voice sparked recognition. It was Wayne. After all this time, he was alive, living under the radar, going by a slightly different name, drifting from job to job, not homeless, not exactly stable, but breathing, surviving, existing in the cracks of society like a shadow. But why did he vanish? What had happened back in 1977? And what role, if any, did serial killer John Wayne Gacy really play in the chaos? What unfolded next would stun investigators, humble his family, and reignite a conversation we're still having today. What happens when someone chooses to disappear? And more importantly, what happens when they're found? The phone rang 3 times. Then, a click. A man answered. His voice was calm, unsure, a little worn, older, naturally, but something in the tone tugged at a string that had been coiled inside his brother's chest for decades. "Is this Harold Wayne Lovell?" the caller asked, holding his breath. There was a pause. Then, slowly, almost like a whisper coming back from the grave, the man replied, "Who's asking?" That was it. That was the confirmation. After 33 years of silence, the man who had vanished from North Chicago without a trace was alive. Not in a grave, not among Gacy's victims, not buried under someone else's name. Just out there. Alive, hiding in plain sight. The Lovell family was stunned, staggered, flooded with relief, but also confusion, anger, and heartbreak. They had mourned Wayne for 3 decades. Their mother had gone gray, wondering if she'd ever see her son again. Siblings had grown up, married, had children, none of whom ever knew their Uncle Wayne. And now here he was, on the other end of a cheap Florida cell phone, sounding like a man who'd just woken up from a 33-year sleep. But what they didn't expect was his explanation. He hadn't been kidnapped. He hadn't been killed. He hadn't been imprisoned. He'd walked away. Voluntarily. Wayne had left that day in 1977 because of a storm brewing inside him. The kind of storm most teenagers don't have the words for. He was angry, restless, unhappy, feeling smothered at home and terrified of his future. He'd heard stories about hitchhiking south, starting over, finding work, so he followed the road. "I didn't mean to be gone forever," he said quietly. "But then, too much time passed, and I didn't know how to go back." He'd lived off the grid, slept on couches, worked odd jobs. He'd used a variation of his name, never really hiding, but never reaching out either. Sometimes he told people his family had died. Other times, he said he didn't have one. The truth, he just didn't know how to go home. The Lovell family's emotions were all over the map. Joy, rage, relief, grief. How do you process a resurrection? And for Joyce, his mother, it was like having a ghost walk into her kitchen. A son she'd buried in her heart, now suddenly reanimated in a Florida suburb, older, warier, but still hers. And the questions came flooding in. Where had he lived all these years? Had he ever wondered if they were looking for him? Did he ever look back? Wayne's answers were simple. Sometimes he did. Most of the time, he tried not to. "I thought y'all forgot about me," he said. But that's the thing about real families. They don't forget. And while this reunion was extraordinary, it wasn't exactly a fairy tale. Wayne Lovell had become a ghost with a pulse. In Fort Lauderdale, he wasn't Harold. He wasn't the lost boy from North Chicago. He wasn't the teenager who vanished in 1977. He was just Wayne. No last name, no history. Just a guy with a mop bucket, a lawnmower, and a knack for keeping to himself. He worked odd jobs, fixing fences, mowing lawns, painting apartments. He lived in small rooms and rented trailers, never staying too long in one place. Always cash, no questions. The kind of existence that doesn't make headlines, doesn't draw suspicion. People saw him, but nobody really saw him, and that's how he wanted it. He'd mastered the art of invisibility, but even in that isolation, he built something that resembled a life. He had a girlfriend once. She didn't ask much about his past. Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe he never gave her the chance. That relationship faded, like most things in Wayne's life. He had a dog once, Rex, a scruffy mutt who followed him around, slept at his feet, and probably knew him better than any person in those 3 decades. But mostly, Wayne had solitude. No holidays, no birthday cards, no Facebook, no taxes, no news about serial killers and missing persons lists. He lived as if the world behind him had never existed. Until one day, it came knocking. The man who found him wasn't a detective, wasn't a journalist. He wasn't even looking for a headline. He was Wayne's childhood friend. Someone who had never really accepted the idea that Wayne had just vanished. He remembered how they used to shoot hoops together after school, how they talked about running away to California, how Wayne used to laugh so hard he'd cry. That friend, now older, had never stopped searching. And when the call came through that Wayne had been found alive, he didn't hesitate. He got in his car and drove to Florida. The reunion didn't happen with cameras flashing or reporters swarming. It was 2 old men on a sun-drenched porch, squinting at each other through decades of wear and disbelief. "Damn," the friend said, staring at him. "It's really you." Wayne nodded, like a man who knew the past was finally catching up. "I thought you were dead," the friend said. "I was," Wayne replied quietly. In a way, that moment, quiet, unscripted, raw, was the first ripple in what would soon become a tidal wave. Because the moment his real name was attached to a living man, the media pounced. The minute Harold Wayne Lovell's name resurfaced, it lit up cold case boards across the country. Police departments that had long since boxed up the case suddenly found themselves scrambling to reassemble what they'd buried under layers of time. In North Chicago, where he was last seen in 1977, detectives dusted off aging files, now brittle with the weight of a mother's unanswered prayers. Reporters swarmed. Headlines screamed, "Man missing for 34 years found alive in Florida." But this wasn't just a headline, this was a resurrection. People wanted answers, and they wanted them fast. Where had he been? Why hadn't he come home? And the question that made everyone's blood run cold was his disappearance connected to John Wayne Gacy. Because here's the haunting truth: Wayne had gone missing just blocks away from where Gacy prowled, in the same time frame, matching the same victim profile, young, male, and trusting. Wayne hadn't just vanished, he disappeared right into the jaws of a monster. Theories erupted online. Some were convinced he had escaped Gacy's clutches. Others believed he'd witnessed something dangerous enough to make a 19-year-old flee his entire life. But Wayne, he said nothing. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He just listened as the world tried to fill in the blanks of the life he'd erased. His family, back in Illinois, had already buried the emotional remains of who he was. His brother, speaking to local news, recalled the nights their mother cried at the kitchen table, the Christmases they left an extra chair at dinner, the birthdays where no one lit candles. "I don't know if I'm angry," the brother said. "I just want to know why." Wayne didn't give a clear answer, maybe because he didn't have one, or maybe because some truths are too tangled to ever speak aloud. What we do know is this: Wayne hadn't committed any crimes, he hadn't faked his death, he hadn't joined a cult or crossed the border, he just left. And in doing so, he'd become one of the rarest kinds of missing persons, the ones who walk back into the world. But re-entry into the life he left behind wasn't easy. He didn't attend press conferences. He didn't give interviews. He didn't do daytime talk shows or book deals. He didn't seek fame. He didn't seek forgiveness. Wayne Lovell only asked for one thing: privacy. And for the most part, the world gave it to him. But for those who followed the story, for families with missing loved ones still out there, Wayne's case was a haunting reminder that disappearance doesn't always end in tragedy. Sometimes, it ends in silence. What does it mean to vanish without a trace? For most of us, it's a terrifying hypothetical. But for Harold Wayne Lovell, it was his reality, and for his family, it was a wound that never fully closed. Now imagine that wound reopening, not because of tragedy, but because of truth. Because after 34 years, their lost boy didn't return in a casket or a memory, he returned alive. Different, older, scarred in ways they couldn't see. But what Wayne left behind wasn't just questions or confusion. He left behind a legacy, one that still stirs the missing persons world to this day, because his story proved something that cold case detectives have whispered for decades. Sometimes, the missing don't want to be found, and yet, that doesn't mean they're lost forever. In the years after Wayne was rediscovered in Florida, his name quietly slipped back into the shadows. There were no updates, no follow-up interviews, no Oprah couch moments, just a man quietly resuming the life he chose. For his family, closure came in fragments. Some found peace, others struggled, and his brother, he said it best: "We spent half our lives hoping he was alive. Now we have to learn how to live with the truth." And the truth is this: Wayne wasn't kidnapped. He wasn't brainwashed. He wasn't dragged into the darkness. He walked, maybe to escape pain, maybe to rewrite who he was, or maybe to find something that home couldn't offer. But his return sparked something far bigger than himself. Because after Wayne Lovell, families started to believe again. Families who'd once given up hope found reason to keep their porch lights on. Organizations that tracked the missing began pushing harder for follow-ups, even on decades-old disappearances. And cold case squads across the country, they reopened files, they reran fingerprints, they looked again, because if Wayne Lovell could be found, who else might still be out there? This isn't just the story of a man who went missing, it's the story of a man who taught us that disappearance doesn't always mean death, that a heartbeat can survive beneath 34 years of silence, and that sometimes, the greatest mystery isn't how someone vanishes, it's why they choose not to return. Don't just watch, respond. Like this video so the algorithm doesn't bury another name. Share it with someone who still believes the truth matters. Subscribe for more stories that deserve to be told.